Welcome back, everyone, to a new episode of the Creator's Log. My name is Carlos. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of having your episodes up on YouTube. No, this is not going to be a video podcast related episode. I'm going to be talking about that in our next episode. Last episode, when I was talking about the hosting platforms, I did mention the small process of taking my episode from rss.com and importing it to YouTube as a video. Now, it's not the traditional video, but when I launched the Creator's Log, I assumed most of my listeners will come from the usual places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, maybe a few other podcast apps. What I didn't expect is that one of my episodes would end up getting more traction on YouTube than on any podcast platform. Now, that episode was the episode of tools that I use for my workflow. The funny thing is, it wasn't a video podcast, like I said, a traditional video where you have a talking head. It was just audio. The experience completely changed how I think about distributing my episodes now. The expectations versus the reality is that I think a lot of podcasters start with the assumption you make a podcast, you upload it to a podcast app. That's where people usually tend to listen to the podcasts themselves. And YouTube felt secondary to me, almost like an optional extra. It wasn't top of my head because when I search best hosting platforms, YouTube is not one of them. It is more of a search engine, which does help, but it was something I thought I would worry about later, not when I was starting off podcasting. But creators often make the mistake of deciding where people should consume their content instead of letting the audience decide. That's why we always say, make sure that you distribute to every podcast platform available. I wouldn't say that I was ignoring YouTube. I felt like part of me was the pressure surrounding the video aspect of it. Everywhere you look on YouTube, you have podcasts with cameras, multiple angles, studio lighting. You have the professional looking sets. It created the idea that if you're not doing video, you don't belong on YouTube. And that is something we all kind of feel in the back of our heads. I bought into that thinking, and I assumed I needed a whole video workflow before YouTube made any sense to me. But that's simply not true. The episode gaining a little traction really changed my mind. It wasn't something I promoted. I wasn't running ads. It was just a simple upload from my rss.com hosting site to YouTube. I wasn't doing anything special. I uploaded the same content I already have published everywhere. There was the same audio. The only difference was a platform. But seeing that without all the promotion or anything additional to what I was already doing for my Apple, for my Spotify, for all the other platforms, I wasn't really doing anything different. The only thing was perhaps the thumbnail. I did also mention about the transcription being part of that. But seeing that happen made me realize I'd been overlooking a potential audience that solely lives on YouTube. And what makes YouTube different, podcast apps are fantastic once someone knows your show exists. People subscribe, they follow your feed, they get future episodes automatically. But YouTube works differently. People can stumble across a single episode because they're interested in a topic. So, for example, the episode was about my podcast workflow. So if somebody was searching how to start a podcast or how to create a podcast workflow, which sometimes I myself Google that, which is why I've been using some of these titles because it's stuff that I've been searching myself. And I'm not saying everyone thinks the same way, but one or two people that do, that is 1 or 2 views that I'm getting. And that pushes the video for a future person who might stumble upon once they Google or they go on YouTube and search how to start a podcast. The episode was about Notion. So if anyone is trying to get a video on how to work Notion, well, guess what? My video will pop up as well. But it's not automatically assuming that these people were looking for my podcast. For a new creator, that's a pretty much powerful advantage because, again, somebody stumbling upon your podcast on a simple search creates a little push for that video. Once I got 1 or 2 views on YouTube, it started moving on to 10 views, to 20 views. Now, I'm not saying this is a 1,000 view video. No, but again, any view matters, especially when you're trying to later on go into your video podcasting journey. You already have some backup and some numbers that can help you push your video podcast later on. The best part is that it didn't require more work. This is what really surprised me most. I didn't need cameras. I didn't need a new audio. I didn't need video editing. I simply uploaded the audio with artwork. I created a new thumbnail specifically for YouTube, one of those dramatic ones, the world is ending. The episode was already finished. It was already published on every other podcast platform. I was just giving it another place to live. That made me realize I was creating all this content and only distributing it to part of the audience that might be interested. So what I'm doing now, going forward, every episode is going to YouTube, regardless, whether it's the creator's log, whether it's the physical cut, all my episodes are automatically being uploaded from rss.com straight into YouTube. Not because I'm trying to become a YouTuber. We all think we are. Not because I'm turning the show into a video podcast. That is something kind of still lingering in the back of my head, but we'll talk about that in the next episode. Because the content already exists. That's why I'm doing it. If someone wants to listen on Spotify, great. If somebody prefers Apple Podcasts, that's great too. And if they spend most of their time on YouTube, which a lot of listeners do, surprisingly, that is based on numbers, not just me pulling it out of my head. I want the show to be there as well. I want people to find it wherever they listen to podcasts. Now, quickly, I'm going to take you through the process of taking the episode. Again, my host is rss.com. I'm going to link it below in the show notes. You can go ahead and check it out. But on the last episode, I already mentioned the small process of transferring to YouTube video. And what comes to play again here is 2 very important things. Is your transcript and your thumbnail. That's the only difference I make when I'm posting the podcast episode on YouTube. So I take my transcript, I copy paste it from Adobe or Descript. I take the transcript, I upload it into ChatGPT, and I just tell it to give me a show note. Simple. Give me an Apple Podcast show note. That's for one. Then I upload it again, or just simply ask it, now what you did, please make a show note for YouTube. Most of the time, I would say 70% of the time, the episode title is a little different from the original title. It still keeps the same idea of the episode, but it does change the title a bit. I always ask ChatGPT to give me a SEO-friendly title, an SEO-friendly transcription. And now the difference between Apple or traditional podcast platforms and YouTube is that when you're in the description of your episode, of your video, make sure that when you're in the description, all the way at the bottom, after the whole show notes, add a few hashtags. You can ask ChatGPT to give you SEO friendly hashtags. You got to be very specific because if not, it's just going to give you random hashtags, including hashtag viral, and your episode is still not going to go viral. If you want to use it for shorts, great. Don't use it for long format content. So you're going to take that, copy paste it on your YouTube video description. The title, make sure that you get an SEO friendly title, which might not be the same title you have for the podcast platforms. And that's okay. Because at the end of the day, you just got to make sure that the title still fits the idea of your episode. My episode about workflow is not the same that I have on my podcast, but it still covers the same idea of the episode. And that's the important part. People are not searching necessarily by topics on Apple Podcasts. They're probably searching a movie title or they're searching an idea title. Again, the basic, how to start a podcast. So if you're putting that on Apple Podcasts, chances are you get discovered easier. When you put it on YouTube, you'll get the discovery as well because that is a very expansive title. But you can't title all your episodes How to Start a Podcast if you're talking about Notion, which not a lot of people know. If I put the title How to Work Notion, I don't think it would get as many views as it did because, again, the app is kind of brand new for a lot of people, not very well known yet, but it is getting an audience. I decided to name it My Workflow because people who work in other things, not necessarily linked to podcasts, maybe somebody works in an office, maybe somebody is a writer, Notion might help that person as well because it is a task related app. You make the list of the tasks that you have to do that week or that day, and that is what the app is. And a lot of other people in a lot of different work scenarios will be using apps like that. If you have a small business, you will be using Notion. So maybe one of the people that downloaded my episode on YouTube, maybe they're working in an office and they have to use Notion now because you could use Notion for a large group of people. So if they're part of a group of people who have to learn how to use Notion, maybe they bumped into my episode and said, hey, let me give this a listen. This guy's talking about Notion, or at least Notion is in the thumbnail. I'm assuming he's going to be talking about it and how he uses it. So that is the importance of making sure that your title, even though it covers the same topic of your episode, make sure you kind of adjust it a little bit for YouTube because YouTube is it can make or break your video with a bad title. And your description, make sure is SEO friendly. Your hashtag, don't go crazy with them, but make sure you have enough hashtag to cover what you're trying to say. If you're talking about productivity, if you're talking about business, if you're talking about podcasting, make sure that's all there. Most of my hashtags between this show and my other show, they're totally different hashtags. The other one, hashtag film, hashtag cinema. This one is hashtag productivity, hashtag creator, hashtag indie podcasting, because I want to make sure that those people who are searching for those specific words find me. Now, the one lesson I've learned while building this podcast is don't underestimate where your audience might be. Sometimes a platform you almost ignore ends up being the one that surprises you the most. For me, that was YouTube. I have to say, for me, that platform was YouTube. I was surprised. And it changed the way that I think about every episode I publish from now on. As I'm creating the episode, I'm taking notes, mental notes. I'm not good at taking notes by hand. And that's something I should probably learn because sometimes when you're creating a podcast and you're having this monologue like I am now, and you stumble upon a talking point you want to expand later on, or make it part of your thumbnail because you're like, oh, okay, well, that will look good. That will call people's attention. You want to write that down. You want to write that idea that could help you later develop a new episode, or that idea that can help you develop a thumbnail art. You want to make sure you have that always. So that's why I try to have a workflow now, including YouTube, because as I'm making an episode, I'm thinking how I'm going to be publishing this audio format now on YouTube and make sure other people discover it. Now, do you listen to podcasts at all on YouTube? I would love to know because it is where people discover podcasts the most. Your podcast might be discovered on YouTube, and then that person clicks on your link and ends up on Apple Podcasts or Overcast or whatever obscure podcast platform they use, which you might reach people in India. They use a different platform than Apple Podcasts, but they did it through YouTube. So you're already neglecting people on the other side of the world just because you think they're not interested on your podcast. I know some people that have horror podcasts, anthologies about mysteries and stuff like that. And I discovered them on YouTube. And then I follow them on Instagram. And then from Instagram, I see their posts and I follow them on Spotify. So it is a bit of a journey, but do keep in mind that this is all a journey. We're all discovering different things at different times, at different moments of our lives. I discovered one on my recent trip about movies and culture in Japan in the 1940s. And I downloaded it, and that was part of my travel audio. I didn't know about that show. I was just searching, and then a friend posted it. And before my flight started boarding, I was like, wait, I got to download this episode. How do I find it? And I went onto Spotify and I found it there. It started going on YouTube, seeing part of the clip, and then I went onto Instagram, and then from Instagram, I found it on Spotify. So it took me a bit of a journey, but I did enjoy the show. And you don't know who's willing to do that with your show. So don't always assume that just because you're posting your podcast episode on Apple, people are going to automatically find it. That is the dream. But please let me know how you listen to your podcasts. If you use YouTube, or do you prefer a traditional podcast app? I'd love to know where you consume your podcast so we can talk more about that and find out where my audience is, because I want to meet my audience where they are, wherever they are. This has been the Creator's Log. I will see you guys next time. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at KRPODLAB and at krpodlab.com. That is my website. Please check it out. Give me some feedback on that. Some people say it's too dark. I still like it. I like darkness. But it's been a pleasure being with you guys here today. I am surrounded by movies because my trip was long. I was out of the country for 2 weeks. I am surrounded by a lot of material I have to talk about for my next podcast. And it is crazy. My desk, I am literally in a corner talking to you guys, but I enjoy it. I do enjoy it. I have to go through at least 20 movies now and a bunch of books and magazines that I got. Some in Italian, no parlo italiano, but I will try my best. But yeah, it was an experience. It was a big experience trying to podcast while abroad. And I wanted to talk to you guys about that today, but I'm still in Madrid time, and I will talk to you guys about that later on. It was a hassle. It was a bit of work, but I made it through. I was editing a podcast episode that got completely lost on my guest side. Again, Riverside did me dirty, and I lost the complete audio on my guest side, and I got creative. So I'm actually going to link that episode here at the bottom. So you guys can take a listen and let me know what you think. I told my guest to send me some audio clips of him answering my questions as if we were in the middle of a conversation and I just happened to stumble upon them. So I made it very mysterious, very dark found footage. I even changed the intro song. While I was on my way to Rome, I was on Suno and I was asking Suno to give me a dark VHS found footage audio, and then on the lyrics, I told it what to say, and it was, "This footage should not be found." Kinda like, a little it was a little funny. It was dark, but it was funny, and then I ended it up with some lady saying, "Burn this recording." It is fun to listen to. I was able to put some eerie music under my guest speaking, which I did with Adobe. So if you guys like that episode and the way that it's formatted, I will tell you it was so easy to do. I was scared. To be honest, I was scared shitless, kid you not, because I was like, this is a big idea that I'm trying out. The episode was actually titled, and I know I'm going on a tangent here after I said goodbye, but I really wanted to talk to you guys about this. It was titled Small Businesses, and it was about how small businesses keep the physical media community alive. And after losing his part of the audio, it only recorded about 13 seconds, and I can hear him perfectly. We had an hour and 20-minute conversation, and the only thing that it recorded was my side of the conversation. I don't know why. So I took my transcript, I created a script out of my transcript. I told them like, "Hey, I want you to say this and this and that." And when I uploaded everything to ChatGPT, for the show transcript, was like, "Oh, this shouldn't be titled Small Businesses. It should be titled The Lost Episode." And I was like, "Holy shit, ChatGPT, you are smart." For the first time, I gave it a compliment because it made more sense, because even though we were still talking about small businesses, we were still talking about restoring films, it was a lost episode. I can make something better out of this. And my background, as I said before, is production management, is event producing. So you give me an idea like that, I am going to run with it. And I did. So again, I'm going to link it here below. You guys can check it out. It's also on my Instagrams. So if you go to KRPODLAB Instagram, you're going to find my other links, all of them there. They're all easy to find. You're going to find my podcast, my physical media podcast. You're going to find my personal one, and you're going to find my website. Everything is linked together. So it's easy to track me. For the IRS, not so much, but I would love to get your feedbacks on that episode. And if you liked it and you want me to tell you the process, I will gladly do so. And even if you don't like it, I will probably come back later and tell you about the process. So again, I will see you guys next time. It was such a lovely time talking to you guys today. I still have to record 2 more episodes for you guys, the YouTube video dilemma and my AI work process. So I will see you guys next time. Thank you for joining me at the Creators Log. Again, I am Carlos, and you can find me at krpodlab.com. That is krpotlab.com. I will see you guys next time.